When people begin to read through the scriptures, they begin to read through the Bible, one of the things that people notice when going through the New Testament is that there are two different genealogies for Jesus. There are two different genealogies. And so when you look at that, you see that, you wonder, my goodness, why are there two different genealogies? They say two completely different things. This looks a little obvious that there could be a potential problem here. Who is this guy? And how do we really know who he is? And why would there be two different genealogies in the New Testament? This is a very important question to ask, and I do believe that if you have not asked this question, you should consider it, because there are two different genealogies there. They give two completely different lineages. But what I want you to consider is that there are reasons why both genealogies are there. There are some very important reasons why they are there. Now, to explain this, the first thing that you need to understand is why these genealogies were kept at all, why they were kept to begin with. It's very important to understand that if you are going to understand why they even exist or why they were written down in the way that they were. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that land is very important, especially in the land of Israel, especially during the time of the Lord Jesus, during the time of the history of Israel. Land was very important, because without land, you would have no place to be. You have got to have some place that you can legitimately be. You have to have some place that you can claim for yourself. You must have some place that you can claim for yourself, that you would have a right to be there. And so in order to enforce this right to be somewhere, you had to have ownership of land. Now, when the Lord brought the nation of Israel into the land of Israel to begin with, he spoke about the land that he would give it to them as an inheritance. He gave the land as an inheritance to all of the tribes of Israel except for the Levitical tribe, and there were some reasons for that. I would talk about that if I was to talk about the subject of tithing, but please understand that the Israelites were given the land as an inheritance, and as an inheritance they had full ownership of the land. It was unencumbered. He even instituted the law of Jubilee to ensure that in the event that somebody had to give up ownership of land for some reason, they would eventually be able to return to it, or their descendants, their children, would be able to return to it, so that they would always have a place that they could be. Now, the second reason why a person would need to have land and rights to land is because that is the means of the development of wealth. Real wealth in the sense of real tangible things. In order to be able to produce wealth as in metals that would be mined from the land, or wealth as in the food that would be grown from the land, or wealth as in the raw materials in terms of lumber or other things that would come from the land, to be able to raise animals on the land, to have the right to be there with your animals, and so that they can eat and grow and be safe. All of this comes from the land. And so if you're going to have the opportunity to develop real tangible wealth in your life, you have got to have some land. You have to have some land in order to accomplish that. You also need a place to store this wealth. You have to have a place to put it. You can't always carry it with you. So you need to have a place to be. You need to have the opportunity and the means to produce wealth, and you need to have a place to store your wealth. This was the purpose for the land, and it was the purpose for having genealogies, so that people could establish their claim, and their claim could be enforced in certain areas of land, in certain areas in the land of Israel. Now, the way that the land was transferred, the way that the inheritance was transferred, was through the paternal line. It depended upon who your father was, because land was transferred from father to son. That's how it was done. Now, there are some very important reasons why this was done in this way. Of course, the first reason is because, in general, the men did the majority of the heavy work that was done on the land. That's why the the land was transferred through the paternal line and not through the maternal line, because in general the men would, first of all, they would do the vast majority of the labor, the heavy labor and the work, in order to develop and maintain the land. But the second reason is because the men were generally the ones who defended the land. The women were not normally sent to the front lines of war. The men were put at the front lines of war. Those were the ones who defended the land. And so that is why it was distributed through the paternal line and not through the maternal line. Now, there was a circumstance where men didn't have any sons. There was a circumstance. Lots of men have children and they don't have any sons. They have just daughters. That's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this circumstance, how do they transfer ownership of the land in such a way that their daughters can still have a place to be and the means of producing wealth and the means of storing wealth? How is it that he can still ensure the safety and the security of his family when he's gone? Well, this was a discussion that was described in Numbers chapter 27, and also, if I can recall correctly, in chapter 36. In Numbers chapter 27, the question was raised, if a man does not have any sons, then can he pass the inheritance rights to his land to his daughters? And it was determined by the Lord. He said yes. He decided that inheritance rights of the land could be passed to the daughters. But then in Numbers chapter 36, a qualification was placed on that transfer, and that was that if this took place, then the daughters could not marry outside of their father's tribe. Because if they did, then the rights to the land would then pass on to their husband, and their husband would then have ownership of land in another tribe. And he wanted to ensure that all the land stayed in the proper tribe in the way that it was divided up. So there was a provision in the law, in the event that a man had no sons, that he could pass the inheritance rights of the land to his daughters, but the stipulation was that they had to marry inside of the tribe in order to ensure that the land remained within the tribe itself. Now, of course, when she married, then yes, that's correct. Her husband would then assume responsibility and ownership of the land. So they had to be very careful with regards to who they married, because this was a very serious matter, a very serious decision, that he would receive total, absolute, complete ownership of the property. And so the decision concerning marriage was a very serious one when it came to matters such as this. It was a serious one in all matters, but this especially. Now, in order to register or to describe or to write down the fact that the inheritance of this land was transferred through the daughter of someone, the genealogy was written a little differently. Instead of it being written as an individual who is the son of their father, who is the son of so-and-so, going back in the tribal sense all the way back to the head of the tribe, instead of it being written in that way as the son of so-and-so, or being written in the reverse as so-and-so begat so-and-so, instead of it just being written outright, they added a word for the circumstances when this was being transferred through a daughter and not through a son. They added a word, they added the word the definite article in the genitive sense. They just simply added that word to say that this is the son of so-and-so of the so-and-so. They added the word the before the name of the father or the grandfather in order to show that this lineage that is being written down in order to assert inheritance rights of particular sections of land, to describe the fact that this is being passed through a daughter, so that when she marries, then the genealogy won't be rewritten. It'll be you just simply add her husband to the genealogy to say that he is now the son of her father. But they would put the word the definite article, before the father's name. They would say that so-and-so is the son of the so-and-so. So by using the definite article in the genitive sense in the genealogies, people were able to determine, first of all, that this genealogy describes a man receiving inheritance rights and claim to property through his wife, and she had no brothers, that she was an inheritor of the land through her father. It also shows that she would have to marry someone within her tribe. So they could not just add anyone to that genealogy. They couldn't do that. They had to explicitly ensure, that this husband was legitimately of the tribe of the woman who he is marrying. So that is how they maintained their records and how they maintained their genealogies. If the definite article was before the name of the person who they are claiming to be from, then that genealogy is from his daughter. And if the definite article is not there, then that means that this is a straightforward pass of inheritance rights from father to son. Okay, now if you were to take a look at the genealogy in the Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 3, if you take a look at the genealogy there, you will find that he talks about Joseph, who is the son of another person. Well, in the Greek, if you were to take a look at the language that this was written in, if you were to look there, you will find that there is a definite article before the name of the person. When it says Joseph is the son of so-and-so, it says Joseph is the son of the so-and-so. And every other name after that has the definite article that says that he is a son of the so-and-so. So that tells you that that genealogy for Jesus, that genealogy is actually the genealogy of his mother Mary because of the definite article. And it also tells you that Mary didn't have any brothers. That's what it tells you. So through that genealogy, we can establish the humanity of Jesus, and we can establish that he is also in the lineage of King David. This is important because later on, this was another reason why the genealogies were kept. First of all, in order to establish inheritance rights, but then later the genealogies were kept in order to ensure the inheritance rights of the throne of the kings.